I'm Jen Drummond. Welcome to my podcast, Take a Break. Take a Break is about enhancing and preserving the greatest asset you have, you. I would like to take today to introduce you to Lyndsay Dowd. She had a 23-year career at IBM and has been in sales for over 25 years as a consultant, manager, executive. She started the company Heartbeat for Hire and works with sales teams and leaders to elevate their leadership and to increase profits, employee retention, and career fulfillment. So I'm super excited to have her today to share her story. So hi.
Hey, Jen. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm so happy to have you. Okay, so here's I'm looking at your resume and I'm saying 23 years at IBM, which to me is almost a lifer, right? If we're going to stay that long somewhere.
Yeah.
And then you pivot and do your own thing.
Yes.
I'm mind blown. Okay,
Yeah.
I need the details from A to B. Okay.
Yeah. So, when you say 23 years, it's actually my whole family was Big Blue. So it was like 105 years for my family, and I was the last one. But it wasn't the same job for 23 years. Those jobs changed about every 2 or 3 years. And what became really apparent to me was I was so lucky to have some amazing leaders who taught me so many good lessons about how to get the best out of your people. And after IBM, I left and went to another company for a short time, and I did not have a good experience there. And in January, I took a breath and I said, okay, what am I good at? What do I love to do? And how can I make the biggest impact? And what it came up with was this job description of this chief heartbeat officer, which is what I am named now. And that job was really focused on building and cultivating and improving sales culture to get the best out of sellers. And so often in sales, when the company's focused on culture, they focus on the big culture, and sales is generally left behind. They have their own HR people, their own leaders, and as long as they're getting results, that's not a concern. But the reality is when people are feeling inspired and encouraged and excited and a friendly sense of competition, they perform and they help each other, and it becomes collaborative, and there's cooperation and there's connection and there's gratitude, and all of those things result in bigger numbers and smashing quotas, and you've created an environment that people are proud of. And that's what I've built in the past, and that's what I want to help other people build now. And so that's kind of the reason I did this. And it wasn't, I want to leave IBM behind, because all of those lessons and all of those relationships certainly come with me. But I wanted to have a bigger impact. And that's really kind of what was the impetus for all of this.
Amazing. That is fascinating. So with this, what has been the biggest challenge for you since starting Heartbeat?
Yeah, I think it's such a hot conversation right now. I think so many people are talking about culture. We had this great resignation. We had all these people leave jobs because they were so fed up. And they were leaving in the middle of a pandemic, often with no job to go to. And when you are taking a jump like that, things are bad. Like you're leaving because you're just done. And so that's not stopped. It's still going on. And the challenge that I see with leaders is if they need somebody like me, I don't want them to feel that's an admission of failure. It's the opposite. It's an investment in their people. And it's saying, hey guys, we got a few things wrong. We got to do something to make it right. We've got to figure out a better way to make you understand how much we care about you, how much we're investing in you, and you're the success. Like if you're happy and you're producing, we've done our job. And that's getting leaders to kind of turn and say, I could use some help. That's a little bit hard, because it's, you got to be ready to look in the mirror. Right. And who wants to do that?
Oh, I get it. So I was in sales.
Yeah.
In my first career, right? We do these different career changes throughout life, and financial services. And I just remember having a sales coach come in every week,
Mhm.
right? And it was different people every week telling different stories or different
Mhm.
ideas or different things to focus on. And it was so helpful
Yeah.
because it just broke up like the monotony of the task, right? The boredom can just really sink you if nothing else does, on top of all the no's and all that. And we learned strategies on how to overcome, and strategies of, hey, if I get 98 no's,
Mhm.
that means that the next one's a yes. And that means I'm going to make this much money. So
Yeah.
then all of a sudden you're like, okay, now I just need to get to the 98 no's as fast as I can, right?
Yeah.
Um, but just having somebody to come in every week was even just exciting, knowing that this is going to change it up. What's the new story? How do we get to be a part of it?
You hit on something really good, and that is when you bring in somebody from the outside with a fresh perspective who has an optimistic view of things, you're bringing in new energy that the company hasn't felt in a while. And it's such a joy when you get to talk to somebody. I mean, I get calls all the time of, you need to come and fix my company, it's crazy, like it's so bad. Or I was coaching a VP of sales, and her boss had made some completely contrary decisions to what he told her he was going to do. And I had to ask her, I said, how long are you going to be able to compromise your values and lie to your team or go against your boss? Like, you're in a no-win situation. How long can you keep doing that? And when you bring in kind of, let me just tell you what I just heard kind of energy, people are like,
Right,
we can do
right.
better. We can do better. And the whole truth of the matter is, what I'm seeing across, especially on LinkedIn, is this incredible conversation that's being had right now about compassionate leadership and leading with kindness, and how you're an effective leader. And this has been really kind of percolating in my mind lately. When you think about tech and you think how it's evolved, and you think about our language and how it's evolved, leadership is the same. It's evolved too. So if you were using those practices before of like belittling or, really aggressive or, only sports analogies, you probably need a course in what's new and what's modern, because
Right.
that's not the way to do it anymore. And
Yeah,
it's
no,
not what people are asking for.
no, I agree. I named this podcast Take a Break,
Mm,
right? And the reason why is all the times in my life that I've taken a break, I've been able to refine my tools, recharge my
yes.
battery, look at better ways to do things. So when I get back into the arena of the game, be it in business,
It's
family,
about
sports,
perspective.
whatever,
Yeah.
right? I'm like coming in ready to go
Yeah.
versus just hanging on and trying to make everything come together. And I really feel, especially after COVID, we were all forced to take a break. And when
Yes.
we were taking that break, we realized, is this drive worth it? Is my culture at my
I
work
say this
worth
all
it?
the time,
Is
Jen.
the
Yeah.
people who I'm with worth it? And if it's not, they're like, I'm not going back. And
You
that,
know,
right?
I
I mean,
just
it's
I
all of
say this a
us.
lot. I think COVID certainly gave me this gift, and I know that other people have shared this with me. I was living um, I was living an obligatory life before COVID. I was going to baby showers and doing the PTO meetings, and everything was, I have to be here, I have to be there, the kids have to go here, I have to get this. It was very there wasn't a lot of purpose and there wasn't a lot of intention. And the clarity that we got from the pandy, or that I got from the pandy, was I really want to recharge my battery with the people that are important to me. And that's who I choose to spend my time with. And the other gift that it gave, like you said, it got real quiet, right? We didn't have the frenzied pace that we did prior. But also being on my own, there's a lot of noise in corporate America. There's a lot of obligations and deadlines and things that you've got to do. And listen, the hustle's real when you're doing it by yourself, but you got a lot more time to think. And that's good and bad. But but it's you really do get that break. You get the clarity, and seeing things objectively. It's been wild, really, really interesting to watch the changes that I'm seeing across the board.
Yeah. And for me personally, realizing how much I'm still achieving or accomplishing, but coming from just an entire state of being.
Mhm.
And it works, right? For some reason, I had this story in my head that if I'm not hustle, 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 then I'm not going to get ahead.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm in this relaxed, calm, and I'm still making progress to my goals. And so it's learning how to rewrite that narrative and
Mhm.
sit in that space of undoing
Yeah.
to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Living with intention. And my
Yeah.
God, your life is so busy. So the fact that you are capable of finding that is so brilliant. So congratulations. It's great.
So when you're helping people with sales,
Mm.
what is like where do you feel like you have the most impact?
So it's funny because there's really two sides of that coin. There's the sales process, which is something I certainly am familiar with and have done and have led. And then there's the culture aspect of it, which is really the part that I'm trying to focus on. I think there's this isn't we have to rip it all down and rebuild kind of thing. This is more nuances. This is language choices. This is behavior choices. This is how do I demonstrate with action that I care about my people? And those kinds of things with just the smallest, I'll give you a good example, just the smallest tweaks are really impactful to people. So one of the practices I love to employ is when a manager does, it's called inverted management. When a manager asks their team, how can I be the best manager for you? Now, first of all, most people have not heard their manager ask them that question. So it's kind of a disarming question. And most sellers are going to be like, what? Hold on, I got to think about it. I wasn't prepared for that. But what it starts to do is it opens this vein of trust and it says, I'm open for some give and take. And when you ask, you'll get wildly different answers from everyone you talk to. And that's based on tenure, age, experience, career goals. And it will help you start this conversation that you need to have as a manager. I think in sales, everyone gets very focused on the numbers and they say, I don't have time for that. I don't have time to have these soft skill conversations. Well, these aren't soft skill conversations. It's a fundamental of being a leader and not just a manager. So when you take the time to ask that question and you get people's responses, when your boss asks you what's going on in the field, A, you're going to know, but B, you're going to be able to advocate for them. And they're also going to be much more likely to tell you what they want to do with their career. And the biggest mistake that I see in sales is you have a rep who crushes it. They kill it. They absolutely murder their number, which is wonderful. And somebody says the only career path available to them is management because we need more of that. And that person may not care about the success of others, and they may only care about their own pocket. And if that's the case, you're likely creating a toxic leader. And this is like there's not a lot of thought that's going into this career path. And there are so many ways to take a rep like that and magnify their success. You can have them lead team calls. You can have them teach a class on the art of the deal. I mean, there's so many ways to reward that kind of behavior without necessarily making them a manager. I just think there needs to be more originality with how leaders are thinking about these kinds of people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a real, I won't say basic, but fundamental of what I teach. It's an easy one to start because you can have meaningful impact. Now, if you're not a sincere person and you don't care about your people and it's really evident that you don't, it's going to be a much harder question to ask. But if you do have good intentions, you can say that with sincerity, and it's pretty remarkable.
And how did you get into sales? Like what was that evolution for you?
Well, I think I was always in sales, like from a wee little child,
I
and I
think
can
we all are. I tell my kids all day long,
yeah,
you're selling me on why you're not doing your homework. You're selling me
yep,
on why you're going to sports practices. I mean, every human that's a walking around is in sales. In fact, we sell ourselves
yes,
certain theories that we believe in every day,
all the
right?
time.
So
All the time.
yeah.
Yeah, it was a natural thing for me to, I'm just that kind of like I'm a connector. I want people to find the value in something. And so that was a natural kind of personality path for me. And I think in college, I ended up getting my real estate license, and I was assisting a managing broker of a firm. And he's like, get your license, you can run the open houses for me. And I was 21 years old in Boulder, Colorado, and there was one agent to every 4 people. So it wasn't like the best environment for me to start cutting my teeth, but I had a good wingman who was going to teach me the ropes, and he did. And, you know, it was always one of these kind of, no, she's got something to say. This is always how I've always been like, no, I've got something to say. I want to teach you something. I want to help you with this. I want to find your success. And that's not everybody's built that way. I had a rep who was such a good seller, and she was making like over $1 million in a half. She was just crushing it. But someone told her her resume looked stale because she hadn't become more than just a seller. I think that's crazy. And so she was doubting herself, and she hired a life coach, and she was really kind of questioning who she was. And I said, I don't know who put that nonsense idea in your head, but that needs to stop. You're great at what you do. Keep doing it. This is perfect for you. Right. She should never be a manager, but for her, she should stay a seller. She delights in the success of her clients. She's very good at what she does.
Amazing.
But, you know, that was just kind of my path. And it's been a fun meandering one. I mean, obviously 23 years at IBM has been a lot of tech, but I did some interior design, I did some real estate, and I worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car for a little bit after college. So, you know, a few other things.
Right. What has been, so I feel people who are in sales getting to like bouncing back, right? Bouncing back when things don't go your way. What are some tools or tricks that you recommend people do in that situation?
Well, you kind of hit it before when you said, you know, I'd make the 98 calls and I get the one and then I see what I can make. I mean, that's the nexus of it. And I think just like we were saying, leadership has evolved, sales has evolved. You know, you can't pitch slap anyone anymore. Nobody's interested in that. And I get them all the time in LinkedIn, like, oh, so glad you connected with me. Here's my stuff. And it's like,
right.
I'm not going to do anything with that, but thanks for sending. So you kind of have to be of service. And I think that's a really different approach than selling product. So the thing that I've seen be most successful is really the listening and asking a client before you get into the, I have a product to sell you, you know, tell me about your job. What are the things that are most troublesome for you? I want to understand. And once I understand these things, then I can better help you. But I'm not talking about me at all right now. I just want to hear about you. And when you come from that approach, A, you're going to have a lot more information. But B, people like to talk about themselves. They like to tell you what's troubling them because they don't get asked very often. So you likely, just like the management conversation, you likely have opened up the possibility of a deeper relationship. So it didn't really answer your question about being resilient, but I think when you're coming at it from a human perspective, which is what everyone is really craving right now, it's even if it doesn't work, even if you can't sell that moment, you might be able to sell later down the line because you took the time to listen and you took the time to get to know them.
Yeah, I remember always trying to be in the second spot. Like that was the goal in the beginning, right? Just get to the second location so that when number one makes a mistake, you're the first person they call. Or if number one retires, or if number one moves or takes a job somewhere else. So it just felt like it gave me a little less pressure to try to take something over from somebody. But it was like, hey, I'm here in case something happens to number one, right?
Well, and when you do that, and invariably these things do happen,
right?
They know you. You spent the time. You asked the questions. Hey, I'll call Jen. She listened to me. You guys screwed that one up. She's up.
Right.
You know, I think when you kind of take the time to invest in people on every level, it serves you well.
No, I agree 100%. So you lived in Boulder, right? For a while, and now you're in Boston or just outside of Boston,
just
right?
north of Boston. Yep.
What was the big move, or when did all that happen?
Well, I'll say this, and I have teenagers, and I think if any of my children did this, I would kill them. But I was I'd moved around. I was in Aspen, Boulder, and Denver, and I had just said, you know what? My family's on the East Coast. I'm going to move back east, and I'm just going to figure it out when I get there. And so I grabbed the dog and a U-Haul and I drove cross country and had no job, had no home, but was like, I'm going to figure it out. Oh my God, there was no cell phones then. I don't know what my mother was
You're bringing
thinking.
out the map, right? Like, let me pull over to this gas station
Totally.
and make sure I'm on the right exit number.
We had the map, absolutely. And
I
thankfully,
get it.
like you're driving through Kansas, there's nothing to see. So you're like, you know, but yeah, so drove cross country and ultimately found a home, found a job, and ended up staying. And it wasn't a whole lot of thought process at the time, but I was young and thought I could take on the world, and I figured it out. So I
And
wouldn't recommend it.
you did take on the world. You didn't, I mean, part of that is the beauty of just doing something, right? Just saying,
Yeah.
hey, it's time to figure it out, make it happen. And I think you build a lot of self-confidence in that when you do those types of things.
Well, when you look back, you think I was probably a little nuts. And I remember I called my mother from a payphone and I was like, yeah, I'm going to sleep in this truck stop tonight. And she's like, what? I said, I have the dog. She's great. She's in the driver's seat. She's not letting anyone near me. And she's like, oh my God. I don't think she slept that whole night. It was very funny, but I survived. So
Yeah,
I
obviously.
don't think I'd want my children to do that today, but you can go backpack in Europe. But I'm not really interested in hearing about a drive cross country with no plan.
Right, right.
So, yeah.
Oh, there's beauty in that too, though. Okay, so you have children, twins, right? Boy, girl, twin.
Yep. Yep. They're
How is
turning 14.
that? I mean, I think sometimes I get asked this in interviews, and it's just always interesting to hear other people respond. How did that affect your career?
Mm,
How do you balance family and work and these things?
it's a really interesting question. I was at the time, I was managing a bunch of accounts, and I had a boss that I did not get along with. And one by one, I was watching him move women out of his team. And I thought I had a target on my back, and I had just been given an award. And I found out that I was pregnant, and that, like a week or two later, I was told I needed to look for a new job. And I was just like, oh my God, like, what is happening?
Baby, and then need to find a new job. Wow.
Yeah, so I'm pregnant. I'm very emotional because it's twins, so everything's jacked up.
Yeah.
And I was lucky. I found a friend of mine heard what was going on, and she hooked me up with another leader who was at IBM. And she's like, listen, I don't like him, and I've heard nothing but good about you. You're coming onto my team. I'm going to figure this out. I don't know where I'm putting you yet, but just wait. You'll be fine. And she brought me over. She goes, we got to do this quick. And I said, okay. She goes, because I'm getting promoted. I'm like, okay. So she brought me over. I ended up doing a stint in marketing while I was pregnant and when I had my babies, which was like landing on Mars because they use different language and different terminology for everything. But it was really great education. And it was kind of a sales role, even though it was in marketing. And I met tons and tons of people that I would never have met otherwise. And I kind of built myself back up and ended up getting back into sales and finding my way through that. And I said to the woman that took me under her wing, I said, I don't know how to thank you. You really, reinstilled my faith in humanity. And when I interviewed with her, I said, I was saying to myself, I wasn't going to cry, but I was just a mess because I was just so emotional and I did cry. And she goes, I said, what can I do to thank you? And she goes, you can pass this on to someone else because there's going to be another woman who's going to need your help. And I did more than once. And that's the same thing that I say to them. So, the beautiful thing about working with IBM was I was able to work from home almost my entire career. And I traveled a lot and I would go into clients' offices and occasionally go into IBM offices, but I didn't miss a lot from watching my kids grow up. So, of course, as the travel increased, there'd be days where I wouldn't see them. But, technology really helped with that. And, I want my kids to see a hardworking mom. I want them to understand that, the world is their oyster. You can make it your own. And I think it's a good lesson for them. This has been a super challenge watching me. And they ask me lots of questions like, do we have any new clients today, Mom? And so I'm like, oh my God, I have enough pressure. I don't need you. But it's nice seeing them talk about it and seeing them, recognize the change. But yeah, I think every mom has an interesting path. And no two are alike as far as I can tell. But I was lucky. I had people looking out for me, and that made a world of difference.
That is amazing. And that's part of developing the culture, right? A culture that
Yeah,
allows that so that you can have the
yeah.
retention of the salespeople that you train and grow.
Well, and one thing I always tell people that they need to seek out when they're in a corporate setting is they need to find advocates. And advocates are a little different than mentors. I mean, an advocate and a mentor can be similar or the same thing, but really an advocate is someone you get to know outside of your reporting chain who basically has your back, and they have their ear to the ground of there's new opportunities. And hey, Jen, just so you know, so and so is hiring, and I mentioned your name to them, and I think you ought to call them. And when you have that kind of, scout kind of saying, no, I worked with her, she's freaking great, and I know her, and I know a lot of people that know her, you need to talk to her. I had that so many times in my career because I had built those connections, and those people that were my advocates still get Christmas cards to this day, and they're still my friends, and they've done amazing things with their careers, and they check in on me all the time and vice versa. And that's just a different relationship than the obligatory, I need a mentor, I need a mentee. Like
Right,
this
right,
is
right, right.
someone.
So how do you go about starting an advocate relationship?
So you got to have a culture that allows for that, and
Okay.
some leaders get very insecure with, you didn't follow protocol, you should have come to me before you went 2 levels up, like how dare you. And that's going to get in the way. But when you can have the agreement that we are going to allow people to reach out to other executives for this kind of advocacy, yes, we support it, nobody gets in trouble for this, we encourage this because we want our good talent to be moving into good places, and we want people to have fulfilling career paths. So what I always did was, thankfully, a lot of the great leaders that I had would say, I really think you ought to talk to this person. And that's part of being a leader. You recognize you have so many similarities with this other person, much like our mutual friend said with us. But when you have that kind of understanding of, I know who this person is, and you remind me of this person, you should have a conversation. Okay. The other thing you can do is you can ask for executive interviews. And sometimes those can start off being pretty formal, but when you can say, look, I'm really looking for an advocate. I'm looking for someone who understands me and what makes me tick. So when an opportunity, pops up on your radar, I want you to think of me. And, would you be open to having that kind of relationship? Most of the people are going to be so flattered that you were thought of in that regard. They'll be excited and empowered to help. It's if you have somebody that's not interested, you should keep walking. But I think it's a really powerful tool, and it's a great way to build a career path. I had another woman that I worked with. I had never met her, and someone said, you need to go and talk to this woman. And so we connected, and she goes, tell me about you. Tell me what makes you tick. Tell me what's your story. And so I was telling her, and I said, okay, so there it is. Do you have anything on your team? She goes, I have 5 jobs for you. And I said, well, I only need 1. And she said, well, let me tell you about the 5 and then you can pick. And I was like, are you crazy? She goes, no, I love everything that you stand for. This is great. You just tell me which one sounds the most exciting to you. And so I did a total first of a kind business for IBM working for her, and it was a joy. But if I didn't have that intro, I would never have known about it. I would have never gone down that career path. I would have never met the clients that ultimately became my only client later. So, that a lot of goodness comes out of those relationships.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. And so when people do mentorships, right? What what would you say the primary difference between a mentor and an advocate is? Just because
Um,
I think that's a good point, and
yeah,
making sure that people understand, hey, we need both of these, and how
yeah.
do you foster those relationships? That's a good thing to have.
Yeah, I think a mentor is more like a coach. And
Okay.
a coach is someone who leads you to the answer versus telling you what you have to do to get there. A coach, you're trying to get the person to figure it out on their own and bringing them to the path to get them there. I think an advocate is more strategic in terms of okay, no, I totally get what you're trying to do. We need to get you in with this team. And you got to call this person because they're going to help you get there. So it's just it's a nuance, but I
Mhm.
think,
No, but there's difference.
yeah. And I think the mentor mentee thing, oftentimes it's mishandled at companies, and they'll say, please sign up for our mentor program. And it's just not done with a lot of intention. So when you can do that, some of my best mentees have sought me out without being part of a formal program, but they're like, I see something in you and I want some of that shine on me. So I want to learn from you. And, that's a different mentor mentee relationship as well. But, it's flattering when someone reaches out to you and says, I admire what you do, and I would love to learn.
Hmm.
So it's a gift when someone gives you that kind of feedback. And I think a lot of leaders kind of poo-poo it, and they're like, I don't have time for that. But it's fulfilling.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see that. I know, yeah, sales is just it's the energy house of a business, right? It's the one
Yeah, and
that's
when it's
generating.
depleted, you
Yeah.
can't pour from an empty cup. And I see this so often with clients when their people are quiet, it's not good. When they're not talking on the sales calls or the team calls, and there's no engagement, there's a reason. So do you know what it is? And that's what leaders have to really dig into, because it's important they know.
Right.
And one thing we didn't talk about was fun.
But
A lot of people get in sales for the money, but it's also fun. Like, you get to celebrate, you get to, embrace the wins. And when there's high pressure, people forget about the fun. But when you have the fun, everyone's excited. You want to share, I did this fun thing with one of my teams. It was a big team, and it was during the pandy. And I said, all right, you guys, I need everyone to send me one interesting fact that nobody else knows about you on this team. And so they all sent me their facts, and I created a Kahoot. And it was this multiple choice game that was with music and pictures. And so one of the questions was, I visited every major ballpark in the country except one. And so the multiple choice answers, I gave 3 men and 1 woman, and they're all guessing the men, and it was the woman. And they're like, Marcia, you visited all those ballparks? Well, what it did was, it was this kind of multiplied icebreaker, because all of a sudden everyone had these data points on each other that they didn't know before. And a lot of it was really unexpected, and it created camaraderie, and it created fun. And that's what people were missing. It's one thing when you just go to a job. When you go to a job and you can engage with people and you have fun, you want to come back. You want to talk some more. You want to learn about each other, and you want to perform. I just think that's such an important part of being a leader, is infusing joy and fun.
right. And I feel with everybody working from home, it's almost harder to keep that environment cohesive and together, right? So coming up with those games
Yeah.
and taking that extra time to collect those facts and put that together
Mhm.
has to have exponential results.
It was so fun. And it was such a conversation starter for every call for months on end after that. So they're like, oh, I figured you'd be off playing pickleball since I know you're the pickleball champ. I mean, just silly, but still, it's a connection. And people really they crave connection, they crave collaboration, and they crave purpose. And as a leader, you have to provide those things. I think when you tell your people what their impact is on the bottom line, or what their impact is on the company, it changes the way they look at their job. And I don't think enough leaders do that. How it affects your quota, how it affects your comp, but you may not understand the overall impact and what that one story of your success does for the whole company. So it's important to remind people of that impact.
Mhm. So when you work with a company, do you work with them for a period of time? For like, what does it typically look like for
Yeah,
you?
it varies. I mean,
Okay.
Some companies like me to do group leadership coaching. So I'll do like 3 to 5 leaders at once. And I have to do my homework beforehand. So I like to interview who works for them. I like to obviously interview my sponsor and get their opinion of what they think is going on. And it'll be like a series of coaching sessions, and then I'll provide a deliverable back. It could also be individual leadership coaching. I do some of that. And then there's also training and speaking. So it just really depends. Like if it's a sales rally and they're saying, you know, we really need to address our results, but we're doing it through improving our sales culture. You know, here's Lyndsay. That's a great angle for them. It looks good on them. And it provides this kind of infusion of positivity, which they need, but it's in the name of results. It's not just, we're going to talk about this, so you know we're taking this seriously. I mean, if nothing happens after that, it didn't stick. So yeah, it could be a few different things.
And I like how you use the terminology heartbeat instead of head count.
Yeah,
because it's really
important.
is where we connect.
Well, it's important, and every sales leader has probably had to struggle with layoffs, and it's when you're reminded of the humanity of the person behind it. I said to one of my bosses, we had to go through layoffs. I said, I hope I never get good at this. I said, this is the worst feeling for me, never mind the person that I'm about to lay off. And you want every leader to feel that, you know, you want them to take it so seriously that it really hurts. Because when you think of your people as heartbeats instead of just a number, you're putting the humanity back in your team. And that's something that everybody wants. It's what everybody's craving right now. And every company's talking about it. It's in every publication, and they're all talking about it. I don't know how many are actually doing anything with it. And when I say improve sales culture, I don't mean putting in a ping pong table and free beer on Fridays. That's not really what I'm talking about. That's fun.
Sounds fun. Yes.
It's great, but it's not going to move the needle. So
okay.
It's got to be deeper than that.
So who has been instrumental in your success?
I was lucky. I had a handful of really tremendous managers, and I'll just give you some of the things they would say to me. One of them, she's a really amazing leader at Salesforce now. And when I worked for her at IBM, and she hired me into this role, she had promoted me twice. And she just said, okay, I want to hear your ideas for how we're going to make this team really crush it. And I looked at her, I'm like, you do? You really want to know? Yeah, okay. So off I went, and I'm telling my team, like, you guys, we have an opportunity to do things different. Let's make some new best practices. I want to hear everything weird that you've been working on, and let's see if we can try some of these things. And we did. We built a storytelling program, and we ended up hosting a call every month, and we had 500 people attending every month. And I had multiple calls saying, I changed my whole strategy based on the way you explained that, because I didn't know what that was. And it totally fits in with what I'm trying to do. That's great. Like, okay, let's keep doing this. And the team really started to thrive because they really saw that their ideas mattered and they had an impact, and giving them the spotlight was part of my joy. So, you know, they'd say, Lyndsay did this with her team. And I say, actually, no, it was Emma. She did it. You know, she's on my team. It was her idea. And that's humble leadership. That's servant leadership. That's good. So that was one. Another leader, she said to me, she had a lot of faith in me. And her words were, girl, I've got your back. Now fly. And what that just said to me was, she has faith in my ability. She knows that I'm capable of this job, and she's going to move obstacles for me. And she did. And she loved to talk about my success. And when you hear those kinds of words, it's hugely, hugely impactful and meaningful that you've got somebody in your corner. Mm-hmm. So those are just two, but I've been lucky. I've had a bunch, and they all still check in on me. And, you know, when you have those kinds of relationships, you never forget them, just like you never forget the bad ones.
Right. I just need to make sure that I remember. Sometimes I'll remember something, I'm like, and it'll be far enough away from the event where I was like, I remember this for a reason. I can't remember if it's good or bad. Have you ever had that happen where you're like, this is sticking on my mind, and that's either a great thing or a not so great thing? I wish I could remember what one of those two is.
Oh yeah, well, that's age.
Yes. Welcome to life.
Yeah, we all struggle with that.
Okay, so companies work with you, individuals work with you. What happens when you're an individual that is good at sales,
Mhm.
but is not in a culture that feels supportive? How do you help that person?
So I'm working with someone right now, and she is a really great salesperson. And what I've been encouraging her to do is to try and build her personal brand. And I think there's a big misconception when people work for a company that is their brand, and really it's not the case. And for her, we're spending a lot of time figuring out, okay, yeah, you work for them, that's your job, but what do you love? And why, if somebody's going to look at your profile on LinkedIn, what do you want them to know about you? And they're like, oh, I never thought about that. And then it's this whole like discovery of what's important to you, because when you post something, you want somebody to realize like you're an authority on this topic. And it's been a real fun evolution watching these people kind of their eyes open going, I'm not just my job. No, you're so much more than that. And I think LinkedIn has changed. It was really a resume on steroids for a lot of people. And now it's become this forum of expertise. It's changed. So with her, that's kind of one of the things we're trying to focus on. And the other thing is that I see a lot of, and I kind of touched on it earlier, is when people are working in these toxic environments, making that decision of should I stay or should I go, or how tolerable is this, or how much am I compromising what I believe in to stay? And I've seen so many people in jobs for not even that long that are just frozen. They're afraid to leave. And I think now more than anything, I think 56% of people are looking for jobs right now, according to a survey I just read. And that should tell you that, the Great Resignation is not over. People are still leaving. They're still looking for greener pastures. And when you are asking the questions of, tell me about your culture. What does it look like? What's your leadership style? What do you do when the times get tough? Can I talk to some people on the team? That's going to tell you so much about what you're walking into. I've definitely interviewed with people that it was a bit of a smokescreen and very different on the other side. And that's scary when that happens. But there's so many ways to kind of get to the bottom of what you're really trying to get to. And if they say you can't talk to people, that I'd just say run. It's not a good opportunity.
Yeah. Survey says
Yeah.
no need to continue. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, so a lot of it is the questions, right? It's the questions you ask yourself, and then you build that confidence to ask the questions of where you are.
Well, and I think people think too, when they're interviewing, they think, God, I hope they like me, and God, I hope I do a good job, and I better represent myself right. But they forget that they're interviewing them too. And when you remind them of that, they're like, I do need to know these things. But what happens when they do that interview, the person's looking at them differently. They're like, okay, this person knows what they want. We better show up with this. This is important to them.
Right.
Tell them that it should be important to them, really. So not everybody sees that. So
No, I get it. And then when when I was in sales, just staying motivated the entire time was difficult.
yeah.
What tricks have you found in your tenure of sales that really has helped you like navigate that lack of motivation?
Well, I think two things. It comes down to leadership. I think the leaders have to continually find ways to inspire and to highlight success. I think not enough leaders leverage recognition, and recognition is really, really critical. And it doesn't necessarily mean you won a trip to Jamaica or you're getting a big wad of cash. I mean, like, okay, Jen, you just had a win. It wasn't the biggest win we've ever had, but I'd love you to tell your story on the next all hands call because it was great. And this is a customer that's going to buy from you again, and everyone can learn from that. Well, don't you feel special that you were asked? And the rest of the team sees that you were asked, and they say, "Oh, I want to be featured next. I want that." So That is one. Fun, we already talked about. Fun is important, and keeping it interesting for people, especially if things are tough. And maybe, I know tech is really struggling right now. People are a little gun shy about buying a lot of tech unless it's like cybersecurity, which everybody desperately needs. But, you've got to figure out a way to change the conversation. And, if that wasn't working, what else can we try? And this is the coaching element of being a leader. Tell me how this worked. Let's do some role playing. Let's figure out a way to make it more interesting. And do you want me to be on the call with you? Do you want to practice? It's really hard to get disengaged when you've got someone who's vested in your success. And when you've got a leadership style that is, I see you, I see what you're doing. I love how you said that. That was excellent. And also be able to deliver the tough stuff and say, how do you think that call went? I really didn't think it went well. Well, why? Tell me. Well, I think I goofed when I said this. Okay, are you ever going to do that again? No. Okay, I don't need to talk about it again. You learned that lesson, but what else can we fix? That's a very different style than, I didn't like how you performed on that call, and you better get it right for the next one. Well, how do you think they're going to do in the next call? They're not going to do well. They're going to struggle, and they're going to be stressed, and they're not going to rely on their instincts. So it's framing things, and it's making, it's finding the good, it's finding the positive, it's finding them a path to their own success, and it's having faith in them. They were hired for a reason.
Right.
You got to believe them. You got to let them do their job.
Yeah, no, I've been talking with people lately with the whole break proof concept and take a break, right? And it's when we break, that's a chance to learn, explore, get curious.
Yes.
And then we can become stronger in that spot,
That-
and we won't break there again. But if we don't spend the time of looking at it, healing the wound, figuring out what happened, then it's more likely to break again, right? And so we just have to really do the work. And by doing the work of the break and seeing what we're learning, there's the proof in there. There's the proof in the break, and then we become break proof. And that's just been, it's funny how much it shows up in every little thing once you start using that lens. Right?
It's so true. You need fresh eyes. You need, like, okay, that didn't work. Go take a walk. Go get away from your computer, because sitting here and beating yourself up after, a failure or a loss or a rejection doesn't serve you. You've got to change your lens. You've got to refocus. And
What they used to say, smile and dial, like,
right?
because they can hear a smile on the phone, right? Yeah.
I do that when I have new connections on LinkedIn. I always give them a voice message, and I'm aware that I'm smiling when I'm doing it. And 8 out of 10 times I get a response, that was the nicest thing. Thank you so much. What can we do together? I'm like, well, you can buy something from me, but no, I don't go there right away. But it does make a difference. It does. And intention, I think, is just, it's so important when you're showing interest, showing kindness, showing that you're interested in someone, makes them open up more. It makes them want to know more from you. And I think that's what people are craving right now. They've been beat up. There's so much negativity in the world. You have to provide that safe, positive place for people to excel and do well and have fun.
Right. Being kind to myself makes me strong, right? Being kind to myself makes me strong. Yeah. I use mantras quite often to try to just keep on the path that I desire to go. But this has been so fun. Like, I love your story. I love what you're doing. I love that you have such a story of resilience, of changing and going and changing and going and being willing to explore and question. It's amazing. I love it.
Well, it's not without its challenges, and anybody that's been doing corporate their whole life and switching to this, it's definitely hard. It is not for the faint of heart. But I've learned so much in such a short time. And I'm just really hoping I can help move the needle, because I feel like this is what people need. And I just really want to see companies flourish and grow. And I love to tell the good stories. There are so many good stories out there. I just talked to a woman the other week, and she was just telling me that, she goes, oh no, my sales culture, it's like nirvana. I'm like, tell me, I want to know. And she said, oh, one of our leaders puts Post-its on all of our cubicles as she's walking by to say she saw that I did 15 calls this morning, and she was super super psyched for me, and she goes, since she's been doing that, we all do it for each other. And I said, isn't that nice that you've inspired that kind of cheerleader mentality for everyone, and it just breeds this continual positive vibe. It's so cool. So I love when I hear these good creative stories, because there's so many and I don't know them all, but I'm constantly surprised and learning at new things. The CEO of Zoom has a fun squad, and I thought that was brilliant. My girlfriend's on it, and she says he's constantly finding ways to infuse fun wherever possible. And it could be like a virtual background, or it could be a challenge for the month, or something else entirely. And that's a really cool leader right there.
Oh, that's amazing. I love
Yeah.
it. Okay, so how do the listeners find you to learn more about sales and all the
Mhm.
things that you can help them with, or just get tidbits from you?
Well, my website's easy. It's heartbeatforhire.com. And then I'm on LinkedIn, also at Heartbeat for Hire. I'm also at Lyndsay Dowd, H4H. And I'm also on Insta and Facebook at the same Lyndsay Dowd, H4H. And this has been so much fun, Jen. I've loved chatting with you.
Yay, the same. All right. Thank you. Thank you for attending.
My pleasure.